On a summer Sunday night, a president went on television and quietly cut the last rope tying your money to anything real. He called it temporary. It is still in effect today, more than 50 years later, and it never got reversed. That is the warning nobody wants to hear, so let me say it plainly right at the top, before I prove a single word of it. The dollar in your wallet, the dollar in your 401k, the dollar in your pension check, has had no anchor underneath it for your entire adult life. What broke that summer was not a price. It was the floor. And once a floor is gone, the thing standing on it does not fall all at once. It drifts, slowly, for decades, until one day people look down and realize there was never anything holding them up. That is where gold comes in, and that is what the people who profit from your confusion would rather you never sit still long enough to understand. Here is the story told straight. For most of the last century, an American dollar was a claim. Not just paper. A claim, redeemable, backed by a fixed amount of metal held in trust. Foreign governments could bring their dollars to the United States and, at a set rate, take gold in return. That single fact disciplined everything. A government could not simply conjure money without limit, because if it printed too many dollars, the world would show up at the window and haul the gold away. The metal was the leash. It kept the people in charge honest whether they wanted to be or not. And then, the leash was cut. By the early 1970s, the United States had made far more promises than it had metal to honor. The world could see it. Nation after nation began lining up to trade paper for gold, and the vaults were draining. So one weekend, the decision was made to simply close the window. Stop honoring the claim. Tell the world that the dollar was no longer redeemable in metal and call it a temporary measure to protect the currency. Temporary. That word did a lot of work. Because temporary is still here. The window never reopened. The leash was never reattached. And from that day forward, the dollar was backed by nothing but the word of the people who print it. And understand, that summer night was not a surprise to the people who watched the plumbing. The crack showed years earlier. There had been an arrangement where a group of major nations pooled their reserves and spent them, together, to hold the price of gold pinned at that official level. Because if the price broke free, it would expose exactly how overpromised the dollar had become. They burned through real metal defending a number. And eventually they gave up and let it go, because you cannot hold back an ocean with a bucket forever. That was the tremor before the earthquake. The world was already voting with its feet, already trading paper back for metal faster than the vaults could stand. And closing the window was simply the moment the people in charge stopped pretending the leash was still attached. The post-war system that had pegged the world's currencies to a gold-backed dollar was quietly declared over. And if you think a government would never change the rules on your money by decree, understand that it has already happened in this country, in living memory of some who are watching. In an earlier era, the official dollar price of gold was raised sharply overnight, by roughly 2/3 by nothing more than a signature. Citizens had, a year before that, been ordered to turn in their private gold. These are not conspiracy theories. These are matters of record, and they teach one durable lesson. When the metal starts disciplining the people who run the currency change the rules, not the other way around. That is precisely why owning the real thing outright, and not a promise to deliver it, is the whole point. A promise can be rewritten. A coin in your own account cannot. Now, I have spent a long time in the gold and silver world, sitting across from people trying to protect what they spent 40 years building, and I will tell you what I have watched play out more than once. The most dangerous kind of loss is not the crash. The crash you notice. The crash makes the news and scares you into action. The dangerous loss is the slow one, the quiet one, the drift that never announces itself, the one you only measure when you look back over a lifetime. That is exactly the loss that began when the floor broke. And that is why this warning gets buried. A slow leak does not sell panic, and it does not sell comfort either. So nobody on the financial channels has any reason to walk you through it. Look at what actually happened after the anchor was cut. In the years right around that break, an ounce of gold cost about $35, because that was the official fixed price the whole system had been pinned to. Once the pin was pulled, gold was free to say what the market actually thought the dollar was worth. And over the rest of that decade, it did. That same ounce climbed past $800. Sit with that. Gold did not suddenly become more useful. It did not get discovered. Nothing about the metal changed. What changed was the dollar, and gold was simply the honest scoreboard measuring how far the dollar had fallen once nothing held it up. But here's where it gets strange. and where most people quit the story too early. That climb was not a smooth ride, and if you believe it was, you will make the exact mistake the big desks are counting on you to make. Right in the middle of that historic run, gold got cut nearly in half. It fell from around 200 down toward 100, and it did it while the larger story, the broken floor, the falling dollar, had not changed one bit. Anyone who looked only at the price would have sworn the whole thing was over. They would have sold in disgust. And then gold turned and multiplied many times over into its peak. Remember that. We come back to it, because that pattern is not history. It is a warning about your own stomach. Now let me name the enemy, because this is where the story gets pointed at you. The large banks, the trading desks, the financial media that leans on them for access, do not make their money when you calmly hold something real for 20 years. They make it on your motion, on your fear, your churn, your buying high and selling low, your flight from the boring thing into the exciting thing right before the exciting thing punishes you. A retiree who understands that the floor broke in 1971 and who quietly owns a piece of the scoreboard because of it is a customer they cannot bill. So the story gets left untold, not with a lie, with silence. Silence is the cheapest tool they own. And that brings me to the part I would be doing you a disservice to skip, because it is the whole reason understanding this early matters. If you have $100,000 or more sitting in a 401k or an IRA, everything I am describing is not abstract for you. It is your actual retirement, denominated in the one thing whose floor is gone. So let me tell you what the biggest, most sophisticated buyers on the planet are doing about it right now, while the headlines look elsewhere. The central banks, the same institutions that manage entire nations' reserves, have been buying physical gold at a record pace. For 3 straight years running, they have bought more than 1,000 tons a year, roughly double what they averaged the decade before. Gold recently passed the euro to become the second most held reserve asset on Earth, behind only the dollar itself. Read that again. The people who print the currencies are quietly trading their own paper for metal. And here's the part almost nobody tells the ordinary saver. There is a completely legal, established way for you to do the very same thing inside the retirement account you already have. You can move a portion of that 401k or IRA into physical gold and silver, real metal, without taxes and without penalties, using what is called a self-directed precious metals IRA. Same account structure, same tax shelter, just a piece of it holding something with no counterparty and no floor to break. I put together a free retirement protection guide that walks through exactly how retirees are doing this. If you are watching this on your television, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. This is not just for insiders or the wealthy. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, this is for you. Get the guide, then come right back, because the next part is where this gets personal. Let me give you a face for all of this, because a number does not knot your stomach, but a person does. Picture a man who did everything right. He worked 40 years, saved diligently, kept his money in the responsible place, the paper place, the place everyone told him was safe. He is not reckless. He is careful. And that is precisely why the slow drift is so cruel to him, because he never made a single dramatic mistake. He simply held the thing whose floor was quietly removed the year he started working, and no one ever sat him down and explained what that meant. He is not going to get wiped out in a crash. He is going to get quietly, patiently thinned out over decades, and told the whole time that he was being prudent. If any part of that man sounds like you, I understand the feeling in your gut right now, and I am not here to make it worse. I am here to hand you what he was never handed. Because understanding the disease is what lets you refuse it. Once you know the floor is gone, a lot of confusing things suddenly make sense. You understand why prices only ever seem to go one direction over your lifetime. You understand why $1 from your childhood bought a cart of groceries that same dollar cannot buy a corner of today. That is not bad luck. That is the mechanical result of an anchor being cut and a currency being free to expand without a leash. And you understand why gold, the boring, yieldless, opinion-free metal, has done exactly one job flawlessly across every one of those decades. It has measured the drift and held its ground while the paper eroded. And there is one more piece of the record that tells you this recognition is not new and not fringe. Across the decades since the floor broke, the dollar's share of the world's official reserves has quietly drifted lower. Not in a crash, not in a headline, just a long, patient decline as nation after nation decided to lean a little less on a promise with nothing under it. What sped that up in recent years was a hard lesson delivered in plain sight. A major power had a large share of its foreign reserves frozen in an instant, by the countries that held them. Every finance minister on earth watched, and every one of them drew the same conclusion. Reserves you hold as somebody else's paper can be switched off. Gold sitting in your own vault cannot be frozen, cannot be canceled, and answers to no one. That single realization is a large part of why the buying accelerated to the pace we see now. It is the same lesson from 1971, learned again the hard way. A claim is only as good as the willingness of the other side to honor it. Now watch how the enemy handles this, because it is elegant and it is worth seeing clearly. They cannot stop gold from telling the truth over the long run, so instead they attack your patience in the short run. Remember the middle of that 1970s run, when gold fell nearly in half before it soared. That is not a one-time event. That is the recurring move. There have been episodes where the machinery of the paper market, the margin rules, the leverage on the trading exchanges got turned in a way that knocked the metal down sharply in a matter of days, while nothing fundamental had changed at all. The floor was still gone. The central banks were still buying. But the screen flashed red, the headlines sneered, and frightened holders handed their real metal to the patient money for pennies. I have seen this movie before, and here is how it tends to go. The shakeout is not the end of the story. The shakeout is the toll the impatient pay to the patient. And the only people who get hurt by it are the ones who mistake a dip in the price for a change in the reason they own it. So, let me be honest with you the way the channels never are, because honesty is the only thing worth trusting here. This is a case, not a guarantee, and it is not personal financial advice. I am not going to insult you by pretending I know what gold does next month or next year. I do not. Nobody does. And anyone who tells you they do is selling you something. Gold can fall. It has fallen hard, mid-climb, more than once, and it will test your resolve again. There is no yield while you wait. This is not a lottery ticket, and it is not a promise of riches. What it is an anchor, deliberately owned, in a system that had its anchor removed and never gave it back. You size it so that a shakeout can never force you to sell at the bottom. You own the real metal, not a paper claim that somebody else has to honor, because we already watched what happens to claims when the people on the other side decide to stop honoring them. And you never ever sell the thing into the very panic it was designed to protect you from. Here is the piece that ties it all together, and it is the reason I said early on that the drift is more dangerous than the crash. For most of the years since the floor broke, gold used to move in a fairly predictable dance with other things, rising and falling against the cost of money in a way analysts could model. Recently, that old relationship broke. Gold has climbed even in conditions where the textbook says it should have fallen. The old inverse rules stopped working. And when a market stops obeying the rule that governed it for decades, it is usually telling you that a bigger force has taken over underneath. That bigger force is exactly what we have been circling this whole time. It is the slow, grinding recognition spreading through the most serious institutions on earth that a promise with no floor under it can only be trusted so far, and that owning something real is the oldest answer to that oldest problem. And this is the recognition moment, the part that should make you sit up, because timing is everything and almost nobody gets this right. The smart money already sees it. The central banks already see it, which is why they are buying at a pace not seen in generations. But the mainstream, the pension committees, the ordinary savers, the financial media that will eventually be the last to arrive, have not caught on yet. We are not in the moment where this is obvious to everyone, where every advisor recommends it and it leads every news segment. And that is precisely why it matters now. Because by the time it becomes obvious, the easy part is already behind us. Nobody sends you an invitation to protect yourself. Nobody is going to call you the day before it stops being cheap and reversible. The window where a decision like this is still calm, still unforced, still entirely your choice, is exactly the window where nothing feels urgent, which is right now. So if you have $100,000 or more in a retirement account, and what I have laid out tonight lands somewhere true for you, here is what I would do with that feeling before it fades. I am offering a free, one-on-one, no-obligation educational web conference, just for viewers who have watched this all the way through and mentioned that they did. It is not a sales pitch and it is not a commitment. It is a conversation about your actual situation, what you hold, what you are exposed to, and whether moving a portion of it into something real makes sense for you. If you are watching on your television, scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. Mention that you watched to the end, and we will set it up. Let me leave you where we started, on that summer Sunday night. A president stood in front of a camera and used the word temporary to describe cutting the last rope between your money and anything real. More than half a century later, that rope is still cut, and it is still called temporary, and the drift it set loose has quietly worked on every dollar you have ever earned. That is the warning nobody wants to hear, because it does not come with a date and it does not come with a siren. It just keeps going, patiently in the background, hoping you never look down. The central banks looked down a long time ago. The question that is entirely yours to answer is whether you look down now, while it is still calm and still your choice, or whether you wait for the crowd to notice and arrive right after the easy part is already gone.